This week on Kits and Cruising, our car of the week is this, the Minari Roadsport, and Cathy Brooks finds another company that's making a great name for itself. This is the Minari Roadsport. In fact, it's the Mark II, and it's the product of a company that, although little known, has been building a reputation for years now for building smart, stylish, well thought out and very well executed designs. It's not often that the ideas we come up with at university or college make it into the cold light of real life. And that's because they're usually great beery plans for a new type of helicopter, a full-size painting of Nelson's column in purple, or some African adventure to find the plant that cures hangovers. The only ideas that do make it into reality are usually those that involve nicking off around the world with Daddy's gold Amex in your rucksack or taking a year out to work in a library before taking up brain surgery. Sean Pendergrast and Andrew Borrowman, though, were a different kind of student. They sat around in their student union and came up with plans that actually did become reality, and there it is, the Minari. Their original brief to themselves was to create a viable alternative to the Lotus 7 replicas that were then and are now extremely popular. And I suppose that the minimalism of such a design would appeal to students, as would the fact that there's very little cabin to have to keep clean and tidy. Having come up with their concept, the two were then faced with a point at which most students get bored, sneak off with a girlie or pass out, making it reality, building it. And it occurred to them that to do that, to build a car, they were going to need parts to build it from. Sean had been racing Alfa Suds for years, which meant not only did he possess a huge stockpile of parts for them, he also had a pretty finely developed empathy with the tolerances and capabilities of those parts. So the Alfa Sud became the donor. And then while Sean designed the monocoque shell of the thing, his mate Andrew set to with his well-tuned pencil and designed this exterior for it. The result was a car that resembles not so much the impractical and cramped Lotus 7s of this world, but rather is a stylish, practical and modern sports car in its own right. Straight away you can tell that this has all the finer attributes of a good small two-seater sports car. It's very lightweight, it's only just over 700 kilos, which is light, and that's communicated in that it being nimble and grippy and nice to chuck through corners. It's very communicative and very direct in the controls, the brakes, the throttle, the steering as well. There's no power steering to get in the way, which makes it enormous fun. It's telling you what it's doing at the front end all of the time. It's also very, very rigid. There's no flex or twist or rattle in the thing. It feels nice and solid. And finally, that glorious engine. It's a boxer unit, so it's got a fruity, raspy note, and that gives the car a bit of character, a bit of personality, which it needs if it's not going to be bland and boring. It's what, 1.5 litre, about 105 brake horsepower, which in a car this light is plenty, and it's got all the fun of a good, small, two-seater sports car. It's a proper little sports car, even though it has the modernity and the practicality of being front-wheel drive. In part 2 of the programme, the little Minari is going to face its toughest test yet when we pitch it against a car from a volume manufacturer and a direct competitor in the small two-seater sports car sector.
Now, those of you who think the kit car industry is all about cheap sports cars, then think again, because you could be missing out on quite a bit of fun. Because from family saloons to motor caravans, if you want it, they've got it. Now, I've been invited here to Iron Bridge to meet the Scamp company, but they said something about bringing some wellies, and I don't know why. This is the 30th year of the Scamp Motor Company, and to celebrate, the gang are getting together as many Scamps as possible for a wild weekend in August. Now, this is Andrew McLean, whose company manufactures the Scamp. Andrew, thank you for joining us on Kits and Cruising.
Thank you, Virginia.
Now, the Scamp has been around for quite a few years, hasn't it?
30 years this August.
That
celebrating
long?
its 30th birthday. Yeah, it was originated by a chap called Robert Mandry, who realised that the Mini Moog had left these shores and gone to Australia, and he wanted something similar. So he started with a Mini and used both front and rear subframes and joined them together with tubes of steel and developed the Scamp. And
Now,
that
how
was the
did
Scamp
you...
Mark 1.
Scamp Mark 1.
Yeah.
How did you get involved?
Well, I bought my first one 20 years ago when I was a student, and I built it up in my summer holidays. I was an engineering student. It took me 6 weeks to put it together, and I had it ready for the time I was going back to college.
And were all the students very impressed with you?
Yeah, it was the best car I've ever had. Yeah, it's brilliant.
How easy is it to put a car like this together?
Well, if I could do it with very limited mechanical knowledge, although I was doing a degree in engineering, just basic tools, basic knowledge, yeah. Drill and pop rivet gun.
Now, I believe this car is based on, let me get this, the Suzuki Jeep.
Yeah, the SJ 410.
How does that work?
Basically, early Suzuki's rotted like anything, and it's basically a body swap. So this is all galvanised and aluminium bodywork, so it should last an awful long time.
So if it's based on a Suzuki, and I know you have one that's based on a Mini as well,
That's right.
does that mean that all the interior and all the engine and everything just comes out from the original car?
The Mini is a subframe swap. So in the Mini, everything in the subframe stays in there, and it's all swapped in its entirety. So all the running gear from the Mini's used, and the seats and the wiring and the lights.
So
Whereas-
you being an engineer, it must be quite easy for you to put it all together.
It's easy for me to put them together, yeah. I've built quite a few over the years, yes.
How easy would it be for someone like me who knows nothing about kit cars to put something together like this?
My sister actually worked for me for a while, and we built her car, and she's still driving it around. She's had that now 10 years. But she actually, with a little bit of help from me, put her own car together.
Really? So you can actually have one of these as a family car, really?
Oh yes. The other cars that have come along today, they're family cars. Yeah, this is my day-to-day runabout.
Really? So you could pile all the kids in the back and go off somewhere?
Yeah, certainly can do.
Well, that sounds good. Now, your company, I believe, is doing quite well at the moment. Who are your sort of typical customers?
Oh, all walks of life. I couldn't typify a typical customer. They come from everywhere. Any age, from youngsters wanting to build their first car before they can drive, to retired people that just want a project to do, an interesting project. There's been about 3,500 of them made.
Really? I think I'm missing out somewhere, actually. Now, this is a budget-built car, isn't it? So what does that mean?
It can be put on the road for less than £2,000 for the Mini-based one, and the Suzuki-based one about £2,500.
So it's a lot cheaper than buying a normal family saloon car.
And a lot more fun.
A lot more fun. Viewers, I think you're missing out. Get yourself £2,000 and you too could have one of these saloon cars. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great fun today.
My pleasure.
Insane, but it's fun.
This off-roading looks so easy. I don't know what the director was talking about. Oh, so that's how you stop a scamp. Well, with that in mind, I think today went pretty well. I'm sure the company benefited from my expert driving techniques, my left-hand reverse and my driving into puddles. But with all that in mind, I'm sure they'll be having me back for some more expert tips and advice. So I'll be seeing you next week.
Pen's been off in search of the unusual again. Pen, what have you got?
A bit of respect, please, Richard. I'm in the ultimate lifestyle posing machine. I'm in a Durban Mariner, not just cruising on the street, I'm cruising on the water too. So, alongside me, I've got Tim Dutton to give me my first off-land driving lesson. Basically, we're steering by hydraulic propulsion here.
Well, you're driving by hydraulic.
I'm driving by hydraulic
But the
propulsion.
steering is, there's a cable that's attached to the top of the McPherson strut, which goes to the jet unit at the back.
Right.
And there's a very small box, which you call a steering box, and that moves as you turn the steering wheel. So in fact, when you're on the road, this little box on the back of the jet is moving as well, but it only weighs a couple of grams, so you don't notice it.
Right.
So the steering is always coupled up for the wheels and also
for the jet. So basically it moves the jet nozzle either left or right.
That's right, yeah.
Right, got it. So, right, what does all these gauges do? What's all this about?
Big wide one. That's the pressure for the hydraulics, and you see it'll go up to a maximum of 3,000 psi.
Right.
Which actually drives the jet unit at the back.
Yeah.
We've then got the next gauge. This is to monitor the temperature of the oil, just to make sure nothing is untoward.
Is that the oil in the hydraulics or the oil in the engine?
It's oil in the hydraulics.
Oh, right.
It's on 40 at the moment, and it won't go much more in this weather. So that'll stay pretty well static, that gauge.
Uh-huh.
The next two gauges monitor what's going on in the engine bay. This one shows the temperature of the actual air in the bay.
Uh-huh.
And the next gauge along shows you the temperature of the oil in the engine, like on a normal car.
Like a normal car.
Yeah. In this temperature and in this country, the gauges will hardly register on the gauges at all. And these two switches, one is the bilge pump, and the next one is a nav lamps.
Right. What's a bilge pump do?
It just sucks out all the water that you get in the bottom of the bilge, by the keel.
Oh, right.
If you drive it normally on a nice sunny day, you won't get any water in. But if you drive in down the slipway too quickly, or you go into a big wave if a boat's crossing in front of you, you'll get splashes and they'll get sucked in through the radiator, and the water will drain down to the bottom. It automatically gets pumped out. Just as an optional extra, like on a car you may have an expensive stereo or something like this, the optional extra on here is the depth gauge and the compass. The depth gauge shows you how many metres of water there are under the hull.
So how many of these have you made so far, and where have they gone to?
We've done about 35 so far, and they have gone absolutely everywhere, all in the Gulf region, America, New Zealand, Europe, sold some in the UK. I mean, they've just gone absolutely everywhere.
Is it the rich and crazed that are buying them, or is it the just the complete eccentric?
Well, I wouldn't say they're rich and crazed, because they've obviously made a very good purchasing decision by buying them in the first place, but it's certainly the well-off.
True.
And it's nice to deal. When we were selling the Durban kit car, we were right at the bottom end of the market. People would buy the absolute basic kit and nothing else.
Well, you are the man that invented the phrase "stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap."
The MFI of the kit car industry. But with these amphibious vehicles, you give people a list of extras and they just get a big tick and they just go through and they'll have everything. So they have depth sounders, compasses, navigation lights, they have the whole business. They just say, everything you can do, put it on. And so we do.
And on the road, it drives just like a Fiesta?
It just drives like a heavy Fiesta.
A heavy Fiesta.
150 kilos more than a standard Fiesta.
Right.
So it's a bit like a small Jeep.
All the manufacturers these days use the word lifestyle. Get your four-wheel drive, tow your boat to the water. For the cost of a family saloon, this is the boat.
If you remember the Matisse feature, there are very few kits dedicated for the family man. Well, there is a success story in this sector, and that is the Quantum Saloon. And this week, we're going to take a look. Introduced to the market back in 1990, the Saloon established a reputation for quality that Quantum carry to this day. Unlike most kit cars, the Saloon replaces a separate steel chassis with a unitary construction, similar in principle to a mass production car. But using GRP instead of steel makes this shell a lot stronger without any weight penalty. The dashboard, the door trims and the seats from the donor all bolt in, so there's no excuse for a tatty Quantum. From the driving position, you may as well be driving a Ford Fiesta. This one's fitted with a 1600 turbo engine, which is as far as you can get with a CVH. But no Mark II Fiesta ever went round corners like this one does. It all makes a lot of sense. This car you can build for about 6,500 to about 8,500 pounds, and it makes no sacrifices. The boot holds 600 litres of space, and with the seats down, 1,400. So to recap, it's roomy, reliable, and it won't rust. The running gear from the Mark II Fiesta simply bolts in and proves every bit as reliable as the Ford Donut. Say you have a family, a mortgage, okay, so you build the car in the winter months. The kids would love to help. Throw in the fact that it's cheaper to insure than the Donut Fiesta it's based on, and the fact that 5-year-old Quantum sell for well over £5,000. And for under £9,000 you'd have a distinctive car that will last until your kids have left home and had kids of their own. So, does that Focus look like such a tempting buy now?
In the first half of the programme, we took a look at this. It's the Minari Roadsport. It's our car of the week. And it was hailed by the manufacturers and designers as an alternative to the Lotus 7. But it was greeted by the motoring journalists and by the people who bought it as being more of an alternative to something like Mazda's MX-5. In other words, to one of the small number of volume-produced cars from major manufacturers, two-seater small convertibles. So, we thought to put the Minari through its paces, we'd put it as an alternative to the MX-5 against this, the Fiat Barchetta, which is in fact another alternative to the Mazda MX-5. It's a lot of alternatives. Compared to the Minari, the Fiat is more powerful. Its 1.8 16-valve engine puts out 133 brake horsepower compared to about 105 from the Minari, but then the Fiat is more heavy, quite a lot, about 250 kilograms more heavy. It shares the front-wheel drive layout with the Minari. It also shares its willingness to turn in. It turns in very eagerly with loads of grip, very little understeer. It also shares its wheel and tyre size with the Minari. But generally, it doesn't feel as taut a car. It feels, if anything, for what is still a small two-seater open-top sports car, more like something that's engineered perhaps towards being a Grand Tourer than the out-and-out sports car characteristics of the Minari. Nevertheless, it's lithe, nimble, fun to drive. You will also have noticed, of course, that I'm sat on the wrong side of the car. It's not me being stupid, it's left-hand drive. Fiat never brought it into the UK in right-hand drive, which was an odd decision, because had they done so, we wouldn't be here talking about this as an alternative and the Minari as an alternative to the MX-5. We'd talk about the Minari and the MX-5 as an alternative to the Fiat Barchetta. Now, when we looked at the Minari in the first half of the programme, I complimented it and its designers for being understated, for managing to hold back, for making a car that is distinctive and recognisable, but not overstated. And Fiat have done something similar with the Barchetta. There are plenty of neat design cues, the tail lamps, this kind of slightly flared haunches that define the car, but they're not overstated. We're not talking about the kind of American excess of something like the Dodge Viper, another, if rather larger, two-seater convertible. And a similar trick has been done very effectively with this, the Minari. The designers have managed to under rather than overstate. I like some of the features that define it and are distinguishable. For instance, these lumps on the bonnet. They're genuine, they're real, they are there to make room for components under the bonnet. And if you look on your side, you'll see the same on your car. This line running down the bonnet, kind of canting the corner off. It runs down the door and spreads out quite neatly at the rear over the boot, giving it this hump at the back. That kind of shapes the car for me, and it pulls it together. It makes it a cohesive design, a complete and very well resolved design, which, and this is not an insult, could easily have been put together by a volume manufacturer with all of the millions of pounds that they have at their advantage when they're coming to design a car from scratch. And that is a high compliment indeed for a kit car. Dave, this is your car. Well, it couldn't be much more your car, really, because you built it, you made the thing. What were you trying to do when you set out to do it? What did you want to achieve with this?
It's very difficult to define. It was something that I wanted to do to exercise my mind, exercise my hands. 5-year engineering apprenticeship, and this is, I suppose, the culmination of that. I built my own car. Absolutely.
So the building part of this was important to you, but it's not just that. I mean, you've created something, fine, but it is a usable something. It's a sports car, and it's got that indefinable something that sports cars have. Anybody who's ever bought one will tell you. Has it measured up? Has it been everything you wanted?
Everything and more. Silly grin time every time I drive it. I look at it and I think, oh, I did that. And I look at pictures and I get exactly the same response. wonderful. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Highly recommend
I've
it.
got to say, I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. I love the look of it. I love the design. As I said, it's understated, which is a nice thing to find. And there's plenty of touches I like. I particularly like the front. The whole look of the thing is, for me, enhanced by the twin headlamps, which I know were only added a couple of years ago. I think they give it just that bit of aggression. It's a great looking thing. A great job. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
So how does the Minari stack up as a viable alternative to the alternative to the Mazda MX-5? Let's assume from the start that you don't want the joy of building your own. If you do, then of the two cars that we have today, the Fiat and the Minari, there can be only one choice. So let's talk finance. Well, you can have one of these turnkey from the factory for between 15 and 17 grand, depending upon the engine and the specification you decide upon. So it's about the same price to purchase as the Fiat Barchetta, or for that matter, the Mazda MX-5. Then you've got to take into account depreciation. Well, the little Fiat does very well. It won't lose more than £1 grand a year. The Minari, on the other hand, does even better than that. Having bought it, you've got to insure it. Well, we all know that kit cars benefit from specialist kit car insurance companies, which is very much to our advantage financially. Then you've got to run it. Well, Dave reports something like 38 mpg from this very car on an 80-mile-an-hour run through the continent, which is very good news. Let's look even longer term. I think that 20 years from now, the Fiat Barchetta is a contender to be a future classic. But then there is such a thing as a classic kit car. And I think that the Minari could well be one. And let's not forget that this can't rust. In 20 years from now, it'll look pretty much as it does today. So, the Minari really is in their pitching as a viable alternative if you want that joy, that certain indefinable something that is the pleasure of owning, running and driving an open-top, two-seater sports car.
My name's Norman Durban. I'm the director of Teal Cars, which are the makers of this Teal, which this model is the Teal 35, which has been in production for 15 years now. There's two models. The main model, which this is based on the Morris Marina, using Marina suspension, it's a rear axle, and you can use the Marina engine or a Triumph 2.5 litre engine. It would cost between £12,000 and £15,000 to put a well-presented car on the road. I originally built this one as a customer, which was 5 years ago, and like a lot of kit manufacturers, I like the product, so I bought the company.
Well, if you've seen anything in today's programme that's caught your imagination, then you can send for a free fact sheet. And the address is Kits and Cruising, Men in Motors, Granada Television, Manchester, M60 9EA. And make sure you send a self-addressed envelope and 2 first-class stamps.